Hello, thank you very much for tuning in. I did a video last week where a Muslim was explaining how he converted to Islam after having been an atheist. So I decided this week I'm going to do a similar type of video, but on a Christian conversion. So we've got here a man who says that when he was growing up, he believed in God. He continued to believe in God. He got into a relationship and he spent some time with his partner. His partner gave him up, and because of that, he felt so much pain, and he looked into his belief in God and decided that God didn't exist because so much pain could not exist in a universe where there's a God in charge. That was more or less the reason he gave for becoming an atheist. So we're going to listen to his story. He then apparently went to college and he got into drug addiction. He was dragging himself through the gutter. He was on hard times, etc. Let's have a listen to his story and see how he came to Christianity.
And so really what my life became was wake up in the morning, get high, try to sober up enough to function enough to go to class, come home from school, get high, try to sober up enough to go to work. And I worked as a bartender. And that whole environment was very much a party scene. So go to work and then drink and get high again and then hit repeat the next day. So it was a constant pursuit of something that would maybe in a sense kind of just kind of put my pain on hold. I was self-medicating. I was just trying to find something.
Now, why did he get into this state in the first place? My own view is weakness. If you rely on one thing too much, if you focus on one thing too much in life and you rely on it completely, in the same way that he was probably relying on his relationship, when that's taken away, it pulls the rug from under your feet and you just fall down. So he was focusing too much on one thing, and obviously when he lost his relationship, he also lost his belief in God, and he had absolutely nothing to hold on to.
That would give me some kind of comfort, something that would give me some kind of pleasure, something that gave me even some kind of purpose. I mean, it really became the center of my life, was just getting access to the drugs that I wanted, engaging in the drugs that I wanted, you know, hanging out with the people that thought likewise. But there was absolute no joy. There was no peace. There was just increasing misery. And I can remember in my early 20s, I'm in grad school, again, just by the grace of God, somehow getting into grad school and functioning within grad school. But at the same time, I can remember being in my apartment, laying down, like just on the floor in such a depressed state, and just I have nothing to live for. And I can remember just laying there in absolute despair with no answers, and nothing. And that's, it was then that everything.
But that's not because you didn't have Jesus. It's not because you didn't have God. It's because you had nothing inside yourself.
Things started to change.
Yeah. I love Pascal. Most of us think about him as a mathematician, but he said
He loves Pascal, and to atheists, Pascal's wager is one of the biggest jokes in the whole of theology or philosophy.
that's something very profound. He said that there's a God-shaped hole in every single one of our hearts. And in your story,
Prove it. Prove that.
Nathan, you're describing all the ways that you were trying to fill that God-shaped hole, but then you met Jesus.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Yes. So we all have a story, right?
Yeah.
We all have a story. So in this bar and where I worked, I met this girl.
Yeah.
And so she was working in the kitchen. She decided she wanted to.
You see, he's making the same mistake. It was a girl that initially somehow pulled his life together and gave him a meaning to live. He lost that and he fell on Skid Row. He fell down into the gutter. No purpose in life. He's got nothing inside himself. And it's taken another woman to pull him up. Same mistake.
To come out and work on the bar. So I ended up training her. Her father's a pastor.
Oh my God.
And she had left the church. She had turned her back on faith, and just ran headlong into the world. And so she was looking for the guy who was least like her father, and she found him. I'm that guy. And so we ended up dating very, very quickly.
What? A complete loser.
Ended up moving in together very, very quickly. And before we knew it, she was pregnant. And so wrestling through that, I remember the first time I ever met her father. Her father is a big man, so he's 6'6", probably 250, 270, big guy, works out.
Yeah.
And so they came over and they sat down in my little apartment, and for some reason, because no one else wanted to broach the subject, I was then given the job of telling him what the situation was. So he sits down, and I was thinking, I just got to do this Band-Aid thing, and he's a pastor. I mean, and who doesn't like children? This is obviously probably going to go well, eventually. Words to my future father-in-law ever was, "It doesn't look like you're taking this very well." And in retrospect, I didn't know how well he was taking it, because he wanted to reach across and separate my head from my body at that point.
He really sounds like a man of God, this pastor, doesn't he? A man of peace. He looks like he's going to rip his future son-in-law's head off him just because he's got his daughter pregnant.
But from that point, we started to engage with them. There was a period where there wasn't much.
There's only one way forward from here for that pastor. There's only one way forward, and you guys know it as well as I do. He's going to have to convert to Christianity, and there's going to have to be a shotgun wedding. There's no other way forward. What do you think?
Engagement, but we started to engage with them, and every once in a while, we would go up and visit them, and I would be not dragged along, but I'd politely go to church, and I would be the guy in the front row, and arms crossed, the worship is happening, everyone around me is singing and hands up in the air, and I'm just like, this is crazy, and this is all it did was just kind of fuel in me.
Why did they have to accept this? They're not children. They're adults. They're grown adults. They're starting a family, whether it was planned or unplanned, who knows. Why do they need this 6'6", terrifying monster of a pastor in their lives? They don't need him. There would have been nothing wrong. He's at college, he's in grad school, he could start a career. I don't know what she's doing. She can start a career as well. They've got everything they need to start a family, and they don't need this intimidation. They don't need this nonsense. So I don't really quite understand why they allowed this patriarchal religious figure to come into their lives and take control of it.
Even more of a rebellion, more of I'm putting my stake in the ground.
If you were really rebelling, you would have got your partner out of there and said, "Come on, honey, let's go. We don't need this superstitious bullshit. Let's go. Let's move far and far away so that none of these people can find us. Let's start a life. We'll have a child. We'll eventually buy a house. We'll rent it first, and we'll live fantastic secular lives. We don't need faith."
And here, built up the atheist library a little bit more, did some more research, and just like this is insanity. And so over the course of that time, although I'd be sitting in church with arms crossed, when the preaching was taking place, there was an audience with my heart. And that's the opposite of what I wanted, but I was listening, and something was going on. And as I got to know my father-in-law, my wife and I got married. As I got to know my father-in-law, I got to see that he's a normal person. He's not what I thought a Christian was. And one day he handed me this book called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and because he had established enough of a relationship with me, like he had built a relational bridge into my life, and then he brought the gospel over it.
Yeah.
He handed me this book, and I had no intention of reading it, but I took it. And I said, "Oh, thank you," politely took it. And then it sat on my night table for months and months and months. And then one night I couldn't sleep. Yeah. And it was about 11:30, opened my eyes, saw this book sitting there, and I thought, oh, what's the...
I can't prove it, but I doubt if it happened like that. I guess from everything he's said so far, he sounds like a very weak person, very weak-willed. He won't even stand up for his partner and get her out of an absolutely dreadful situation. I'd be willing to bet that he started reading that book the very first day that he was given it, and he felt like he was under so much pressure to join in with that community that he eventually bought the whole lot, hook, line, and sinker.
Harm in opening it up, so I opened it up, I started reading it, and I was instantly engaged. And I got about halfway through this book, and the scales fell off my eyes. And I became absolutely convinced in a moment that Jesus Christ is exactly who he says he is. And in that moment, all I knew is that I know nothing. I know that Jesus is Lord. I know that I'm a sinner. Other than that, I don't know anything. I got out of my bed. It's about 3:30 in the morning, went into my bathroom, fell down on the floor, and gave my life to Jesus Christ, asked him to forgive me for my sins.
Wow.
And my wife woke up the next morning to an entirely different person. And in some ways, this was kind of like the worst nightmare.
Yeah.
But what was it in C.S. Lewis's book specifically? What evidence was there that convinced him that Jesus Christ is Lord? He didn't say. I've got books by C.S. Lewis. I read through them, and within one or two sentences, I'm thinking, I'm not sure if that's true. How does he know that? How does he know that? Where does he get that claim from? How did he draw that conclusion? But that's me.
Well, Nathan, I absolutely love your story and the way that you described scales falling off of your eyes. And if you've never read that book by C.S. Lewis, he talks about how Jesus is either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. And for Nathan, as he was on his spiritual journey, he realized that Jesus is Lord. And perhaps you're listening.
Well, I'm not really sure if I agree with Lewis there. Jesus is either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. There are other options. There are other options. He might have just been an itinerant rabbi who was moving around at that time, moving around the Holy Lands at that time. He had a following, and he wasn't a liar. He wasn't a lunatic. Maybe he was genuinely convinced that he was the Son of God, and maybe he was just mistaken. There are other options besides those three presented by C.S. Lewis.
Into this story and into this segment, and there's something going on in your heart right now, and you don't necessarily know if Jesus.
Okay, well, he's preaching now. That's it, really. That's the story. So let's just recap. He started off as an atheist. He started off believing. So bear this in mind. He started off as a believer. He met somebody, and the relationship ended. He lost his faith because he reasoned that in a world where there is a God, there couldn't be such pain. Bad things shouldn't happen. That's really strange, because in all the times when he was with this woman and he was happy, was he not looking around himself and seeing bad things happening as well as good things? So it seemed that when something bad happened to him, then he decided to stop believing. Started feeling sorry for himself, realized he had absolutely nothing inside himself, started taking drugs, etc., fell into the gutter. And then it was another woman that pulled him out of the gutter. He met her. And this brings me back to the Muslim story from the previous week, because community was a big theme in that. He was in a community of Muslims in the Middle East, and he was so enmeshed in that community, he trusted it to such a great extent that for him to continue to be an atheist in that kind of community really is fairly inconceivable if he wanted to have a long-term future in it. He didn't give any good reasons for accepting that Allah is the one true God and all the Islamic doctrine. He didn't give any good reasons at all. He went through this fasting process, and he came out of it, and he just said he realized that Allah was the one true God, and he became a Muslim. He converted to Islam. He didn't give any good reasons. And in this story as well, he hasn't given any good reasons either. He didn't say what it was in Lewis's book that convinced him. This thing about Jesus as either liar, lunatic, or Lord, that's not a good reason, because there are other options, and I would like to see what he has actually read But I suspect he wouldn't be able to say anything more than he's already said. If there was something better that he could offer, then I would think that he said it. He would have said it. So I think that in the end, it's community again. He's in this community of Christians. He's going along week after week. And at first he's resistant. And in the end, he decides to accept it all. And really, it's the easiest possible thing because he's married this girl. She's obviously come back into the Christian fold. And it would be pretty stupid that if he wants to remain married to her, he's going to continue to resist and be an atheist. So he accepted it too. I'm not saying that's definitely how it happened, but I'm putting it out there as a possibility. But I haven't seen any good reason for him or anybody to convert to Christianity. He didn't give any good reasons. So that's all for now. Let me know what you thought. Bye for now.